Good morning. It's Anne-Marie here again of ASargentArt, and I would like to, excuse me, I'd like to continue this little landscape video because it is Monday morning and I am procrastinating my work projects today. This just seems much more fun. So the first thing I'm going to do is, I don't know if you can see in the picture, but there's some pencil line here that isn't in the right place. So I'm going to go ahead and erase this line. This one is covered by clouds, so there's nothing I can do about that. That will just be part of my setup process. But to me, you know, this is all part of not letting my sketchbook become too precious. You know, so precious I don't want to fail. I don't want to make a mistake. Because if I'm not willing to do that, then I'm not going to learn. I'm not going to push myself forward. I'm not going to practice. So it just needs to, we need to cut ourselves some slack and just learn, you know. I think especially for people who are new at this, the sketchbook is such a wonderful place to just explore. And I would say, you know, if you just let yourself explore and play for a year or two, you're gonna be in great shape. So let's look at what I'm liking. I'm really liking the clouds. I think the clouds turned out really good. It looks like a stormy day. Speaking of a stormy day, it's kind of a stormy day today too. And now it is time to add some definition to my mountain. Now I have kind of a special brush for this, which I'm going to confess to you. If I can find it, maybe I cannot find it. Sometimes I let students use my brushes in class and then I don't get them back, which is a tiny bit of a problem. But okay, so we'll use a different brush. We'll actually use a couple brushes. We'll use... so what I'm going to use here is a rigger, which is a long, thin brush, and also this small, it's a 0 mop brush, because obviously I have a very small piece of paper here. So what I want to do is I want to add some definition to the mountain, and where I have, my sky has gone over my line, you know, that can be part of this rock formation. Then I need some rock formations over here. I also need a little bit of shadow where there would be, you know, the glacier reflecting light over here. I can't see that very well in the photograph, but I know from studying other artists that that's what happens. From Molly Hashimoto, which I will try to remember to link because I've just been obsessed with her lately. So what I want to do is I want to make a couple colors, and one should be a lighter version of my sky. So let me spritz my paints. And get a little more blue. And for now, I'm going to start with this mop. And I do want to test this because I do want to make sure that I'm getting a nice light color. So, but I also want a darker color because I definitely see rock formation there too. So let's go ahead and touch. And I'm going to do that over on this side because I don't want it to mingle with my, I'm actually in the stages of making a bigger palette so that I have a little more room. But I don't want this to mingle with my the color that I need to reflect the blue sky. I see a dog hair swirling in there. And so we'll see, I think that could use a little bit of blue because it's a little too brown. And so I'm going to touch a little bit of blue in there. And why am I doing that? Partly because I want to see rock formation in that color, but also because as objects, as mountains, as landscapes are further away from us, we get the effect of the bluing of the atmosphere. I need to figure out why that happens so I can explain it, because I talk about it all the time. I don't know why that happens. It has something to do with the color spectrum and how blue filters through, but other colors don't filter through the atmosphere from that far away. But let me work on that. And if any of you know, I would love to hear it. Okay, so for the rock formations, what's great about those is the main thing I want to look at is the angle at which they are coming down. And so I'm probably going to hold this kind of loosely this way. And, you know, the angle at which I'm going to come down is going to make a big difference. Now, I also want, I'm not going to do these yet because those need a darker color, but I want it to be pretty jagged. You know, these are rocks. This is not nice. This is not soft land. So let's just start with this one over here. And you can see that as I'm moving my brush down, I'm just getting some nice kind of, that's why exploring what your brushes will do, it seems like an exercise that beginners don't really want to engage in very often, but it's just really important because this can just save me a lot of time if I understand what my brushes will do. Now, I don't need to worry about going over this rock line because that's going to be much darker. So I actually need a little bit more paint. And so I always try to mix up more paint than I think I need, but I failed in this instance. But that's okay because I don't actually even want this to be the same color. Now that I have that color down and it's wet, I can actually just kind of drop in other color and add some variety. And if it's not spreading very much, I can move it around a little. And then I see that there's like a little rocky spot up there and maybe one over here and stuff like that. So, and again, I don't need to worry about going over that line because that's all going to be much darker. Now that's too much white. You know, it just looks kind of unfinished. So then I will take this other brush and get back to this color that I created to have something much lighter that will kind of reflect the glacier. And let's put it up to there. And I don't really like this hard line right here. That looks kind of weird. So I'm just touching my brush and kind of getting some of that paint off because all I want is just a little hint of color. But as you can see, it's more about the strokes that I'm showing that this is a dynamic landmass. And I can even, my brush is pretty dry right now because I've been touching it to this sponge. So I can even get a little bit of water and maybe even leak some of this over here. Why? I don't really know why, just because it doesn't look complete. And actually, this part is going all the way down to this rock. So I should go ahead and finish that like that. And then I'll just paint over that part. Okay, so that's pretty much what I see of that mountain. Maybe that could be a little bit softer. And I do see just like one more little darker spot that I could maybe put in there. Okay. Now, I feel like that doesn't look very complete. It is kind of showing what the picture shows, that there's rock here and then just some dots and dashes. So I feel like I did what the picture is doing. I'm not sure that it looks finished. But this is the stage where I would not do any more to that because one of the reasons it looks finished is because I have a whole band of white here that is not finished. So of course it doesn't look finished. So it gets back to the idea we got to bounce around our picture. We did the sky, we did some mountain, we got to do now we got to do the darker value of the rock formation and see how we go. So for the rock formation, now I'm going to take a flat brush and I'm going to mix a much darker color. And I'm going to spritz my colors again. I'm always, you know, your colors they'll dry out. So just that's why I love the spritzer. You know, some people, they just drip water on them like this, and you can totally do that. But I find that a little tedious for as often as I spritz. So Now I have some other kind of junky colors over here, and I'm okay with that. I'm just kind of, this is sort of the side of my palette I use for neutrals. So I'm just kind of clearing those out. And I think by the time I get some blue in there, that's all gonna be all right. So now I do want, you know, you can tell that the value of this is pretty dark. And by value, I mean on the grayscale, is it, you know, is it a 1, the 1 of snow? Is it the 3 of the sky? Or, I mean, this is like an 8 or a 9. It's so dark. I would say this is a 10, this tree and these trees in front. That's how we know that they're closer, is they're reading closer because they have more darkness and more definition. The atmosphere hasn't blued them out because they're closer to the viewer. So, you know, this might be, let's say that's like a 7, and this is more like a 9. So that's what I'm going for, is I have to be able to achieve, so that's just not dark enough. So I'm going to take a little more brown. This is a raw umber, which I really like because it is transparent and non-staining. And you know, watercolor does dry a little bit lighter. It's unlike oils and acrylics that way. So I do want it a little darker than I think I do. That's pretty dark. That might actually be too dark. Well, at least wet. It looks like it's the right color for the trees. So let me just take a little bit of water and add to this pile, and then we'll see. Okay, we'll see how we go. But we can't go back, right? So I have to pick a color that I can make the trees darker. So now this rock formation, I see that the spires are coming out, but then there is some snow that's captured down in here and down under here and kind of in here a little bit. So what I want to try to do is I want to capture the dynamic rock formations without covering the whole thing, you know. Here it's kind of splitting this way. So I'm just going to hold my brush really loosely. Let me see if this... And some of this, you know, that may not work, although maybe it will. Maybe it will just read like there's snow trapped in there, you know. And then I can turn it on its tip. Now here, even though I don't want the same color the whole way across, okay? So I'm just touching in a little blue. Now this is very dynamic. I really like that. So on that, I'm actually going to use the very tip of my brush, and I'm going to kind of do stuff like this. Just dots and dashes. Now I know, you know, that looks like, oh God, you make it look so easy. Well, I've been doing this for a long time. So I probably do make it look pretty easy. I hope so, because it is pretty easy. The hardest part is just loosening up. You know, that's the part that people have the hardest time with. Once you can loosen up and trust your brushes a little bit to dance around and stuff, it's not so hard. And let me just touch in a little bit more blue and kind of, I'm going to see how this formation is going that way now. So let's kind of take this over here and drag that down a little. And then what do we got going on over here? I'm going to need more rocks over here. Now, I know, obviously, right, that I'm going to cover a lot of this with the trees. In fact, this whole bottom part you're not even really going to see. Now that looks very kind of green to me. I probably added a little too much blue. So what do I do about that? Let's come in here with some brown. And maybe a little of this, it's neutral. There's neutral tint. There's Payne's gray. This is a Payne's blue gray. So you can see what's happening here is the color is just kind of moving all over the place. It's because there's too much water and not enough pigment. So I'm going to go ahead and get a little bit more of this Payne's blue gray, or you can use a neutral tint. And as I'm doing this, I'm just kind of not smoothing out, because I do like the jaggedness here, but I can kind of make the shapes, you know, a little different. Maybe get more of a point. I can move the paint around a little bit is what I'm trying to say. It's hard to talk and paint at the same time. But I think, you know, in the end, this is going to read, because, you know, whoever looks at this is not going to have the photo reference right next to them. So they're not going to be like, oh, Anne Marie, your jag is over there, and that's not really where the jag was supposed to, you know, they're not going to know. We forget that sometimes when we're using a photo reference. That always indicates to me that I've gotten too attached to my photo reference if I forget that nobody actually is going to have the photo reference. Okay, so that's enough with that brush. That's a pretty big brush. Now I'm going to take this rigger again, which is a nice little pointy brush. You could also use, you know, some of you might have like a brush like that comes in a set. This is just a 0 round. What I like about this one is it's a little floppy. And so I can't control the lines so much, and I can actually kind of come around, and then I'm just sort of filling in some of this white space. And I've gone over that line. Is that okay? Yes, of course it's okay. I mean, if it really bugs me, I can always come over here and kind of make this into a border or something, but I just don't really care. This is my sketchbook. This is my place to just learn and play and I would want to do this type of exercise if I think I'm going to make a whole painting of this, which I'm not. But if I think I'm going to make a whole painting of this, then I would want to go through this exercise. And now I'm just taking more of this thick paint and kind of dabbing it in here, just so there's a little more variety than what I'm seeing right now. Okay, so I don't know if that's going to read as rock. I hope it does. I see some places where I could actually make, now that I have the smaller brush, I'm going to add a little paint because I'm actually lifting paint now. I can see a place where I could make more of a valley there and kind of dots and dashes here. Now, I do have to be careful because these don't really lean, you know, because of the erosion, they're not leaning so much. So even though I have a tendency to make my lines lean, I need to be careful not to do that here because that's not how things erode and that will not read correctly. Okay, I think I'm satisfied with that. Like I said, this bottom part, nobody's going to see because it's going to be covered with these trees. And because I want the trees to be... because I see them so clearly because they're closer to the viewer, I need to not paint over that because if I paint on it now, it's just gonna, which is great as I was trying to drop in color, but that's not gonna be great if I'm trying to draw trees over it that, paint trees over it that are more defined for the viewer. So once again, we've had like, I don't know, a 10-minute painting session, and now I have to let it dry and maybe go do some work. So I'll see you guys for part 3, which is adding the dark trees.